By the time you get to excruciating pain, you may have some horrible infection, and these infections can go septic, and people have died. So you don't want to wait. You don't want to mess around with this kind of stuff.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
Dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode, Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. We are out of town this week. MTMP, she's getting some insider info for us. We're going to have some big updates at next week's show. But until then, we're going to have a nice little highlight, cut up of some of the biggest facts and things to know about a few different cases that we've been talking about over the last several weeks. All these cases have been going on for years and years, and some of them we are kind of coming to the finish line. And it is incredibly important that if you do have any of these products, any of these issues, that you reach out to us. And if you're unsure about any of this information, this is the episode for you. You're going to be able to find out everything that we've been covering over the last several weeks, last months about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the two topics that we're going to be addressing today are hernia mesh. And we've talked a lot about hernia mesh in several episodes. So we're going to put all of that together in one concise episode so that you'll know all about the problems with the hernia mesh products. And if you have a hernia mesh product and you've had any symptoms, again, this is the time to reach out to us. So this will give you all of that information. The other topic we're going to talk about are surgical infections that result from a product called the Bair Hugger forced air warming device. Again, this is a product that you wouldn't even know if it was used. It would have been used during a joint replacement surgery. So we're going to consolidate that as well, kind of remind you about that. And if you've had a surgical infection after joint replacement, again, reach out to us.
And sometimes these things can be a little overwhelming. Again, everything that you're going to need to know is going to be in this podcast. But if you have any questions, any concerns, or any uncertainty, whatever it may be, you can always reach out to us. Send us an email, send us a DM on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is. We'll get back to you. And if you don't know where to start, when you reach out to us, we'll take care of everything for you. Hope you enjoy. We've been talking about a lot of the cases that we've been handling. Always got a nice little section on it. Is there any updates or just more information on some of the cases that we are handling?
Well, so what we're focusing on today is hernia mesh again, and we have spoken about it a couple of times and a couple of the different products that are out there. But the real key that I wanted to address this time is just the timing. That these cases, they've been going on for over 5 years. We are coming up on another bellwether trial in October, and then following that one, there'll be another one at the beginning of 2024. And these cases it looked like they were going to be settling about a year and a half ago, but it's kind of a hot topic now because with the 3M earplug situation, that case settled, as we talked about, and all of a sudden people are coming out of the woodwork and they're saying, wait a minute, I want to be a part of this, and it's too late to do that. And we've had a lot of people calling, well, why didn't I know about this? And, well, yeah, I did know about that, and I started filling out the paperwork, but I never completed it, but I want to complete it now. And the problem with that is that if you wait too long, it potentially can be too late. And with the hernia mesh cases, this is a product that so many people have. I mean, it is a really common surgery. So many people have hernia meshes, and this mesh, it can break down, degrade in the body, and cause all kinds of problems, and usually requiring additional surgeries. So it's imperative that if you have one of these cases, that you contact somebody sooner rather than later, because there will be a cutoff date. And then we'll be getting all the calls saying, wait a minute, wait, I want to get in on the settlement. And unfortunately, we will not be able to help them at that point.
Well, and this is a massive one. I know it's been going on for a really long time, and it's not just one type of hernia mesh. There's a lot of different brands that are causing these issues. And some of these issues, there are some really, really bad ones, and then there's some, on both sides of the scale, but some of them take a long time to come up.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing too, because you have the surgery and you heal fine, you recuperate fine, you go back to work, you go back to your life. So it's not something that you know right away there's a problem, but then the product starts to break down in your body. And so it's never right away. If it's right away, then it's more likely a problem with the surgery, with a surgical infection, something like that. It's probably not the product.
Yeah.
The product, it's going to take months to even years before you really start experiencing these side effects. And they're really nasty. I mean, people have chronic pain. They end up with these infections as it starts to break down and cause inflammation, and they can perforate organs.
Yeah, I know one of the worst ones you mentioned is how it kind of entangles with the organs and muscles and everything in there, because, I mean, it's just put in there to kind of hold everything up, right? Maintain its spot, but when it starts breaking up, that same material starts just getting stuck in places it shouldn't be.
Right, and then even when you have the surgery to try to remove it, it's a mess when you go in. I mean, they've likened it to like having bubble gum in your hair.
Jeez.
I mean, you cannot, you can't save the hair. You're basically going to cut a big hunk out. And so, and there are times where you'd have to remove so much tissue, they end up having to just leave that mesh in there, and it's causing, pain and suffering, and they just can't get it all out.
And the materials that they're using in some of these meshes are just shocking.
Well, yeah, it's the polypropylene and then some of the polyester, but it's just products that shouldn't be used in the human body. We've talked about that in the past, and it's just a disaster.
So, this case has been going on for a while, and that's one of the reasons it's important to reach out as soon as possible, and definitely not wait till the last minute, is because you might be having problems that you don't realize are connected, or there's signs that you will have problems in the future. But once this is settled, or once that cutoff happens, what if someone gets hernia mesh that is involved in this case, or that the product is involved in this case, and then ends up having problems afterwards? I mean, they didn't even have a chance to get into the case. Does that ever happen? Or
yeah, it does. And it's not that they cannot pursue a claim, but they wouldn't be able to participate in that global settlement. So they could file an individual lawsuit and proceed with that, against the manufacturer of their mesh. But it is a much more time-consuming, expensive process. And so it really only makes sense for very, very severe injuries, because you're going to spend so much money getting to that point, getting to the trial.
Yeah.
And so your reward needs to be significant enough that you can, reimburse all of those costs and still have it make sense, and the attorney's fees, and still have it make sense for you. And so one thing that a lot of people don't know about the way that these global settlements work is that, people are signing up cases, they're, representing clients for years as this goes on. Some of the trials are happening, and then this global settlement comes up, and they're usually different categories, and each case is evaluated within whatever structure they've developed in that particular settlement. And people can choose not to participate in the settlement if they want to take their case out, have it sent back to their home court and litigate it. They can do that. But if you aren't in and the cutoff happens, you can't get in. And so for example, a law firm who maybe has 100, several hundred, or however many cases they have to agree at the cutoff time that they won't take additional cases. And so those firms, again, they need to look out for the clients that they do have.
Yeah.
And their deal is that they're not going to sign up additional clients. So that can really affect your ability to get an attorney at that point.
That makes sense. And these are the law firms that have the most experience. They know what to do. They know how, they just know how it all works. And so they're the ones that you would want on your side, but you won't be able to after that date.
Right. I mean, and there have been shenanigans. There was one story years ago about an attorney and his wife, who was also an attorney, then formed her own law firm.
Oh, yeah. That's like
it was convenient timing, because all of a sudden now she's still signing in the cases in a different thing, of course, not hernia mesh, that was settling. So they're but I mean, you don't want to be caught up in something like that. It's
like the Texas two-step, but on the other side of the table.
On the wrong side. Yeah. So yes, you still could potentially bring a case if it's within the statute of limitations, which is another time limit. And again, another reason why you need to contact somebody sooner, not later, because you may just not even have a case, period, in a global settlement or outside of it. But once and for a lot of people, these settlements make the most sense. I mean, if they had, even pretty significant injuries, they're still going to get a good compensation, and they're not going to have to go through depositions. They're not going to have to go through trials. and they're not going to have that risk of potentially losing at trial, because some of these cases are defense verdict. There's no question about that.
Well, and it makes sense too, is that, I mean, this whole reason that mass torts exist, right, is because when there are victims of the thousands, of the 100,000, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever it is, these large numbers, it makes sense for both sides to kind of put it all together. And it's beneficial for both sides. It's easier for the defense, and it's easier for the prosecution as well. Kind of being left out on a raft by yourself later down the line, like you said, it is going to be incredibly difficult and sometimes not even make sense, even if you do have some serious injuries. And the same injuries that you may have down the line, that you could get a payout from this first one, right? This original mass tort, everyone together, you might not be able to get it down the line. It just doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's more cost effective and efficient for both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really why the whole system works, why it was created, why it works.
Well, we'll see. And I think it's important for people to reach out too, because, even if you aren't having problems, what's wrong with going to get it checked out? If I knew that there was something that had these potential risks in my body, even if I wasn't already experiencing it, but knew that there was, this entire process that has been going on for several years, I'd want to take a look. I want to, double check just to be sure, so I don't have issues, in another year, another 2 years.
Well, and some people, even when they've come to us, they've said, how long was this bothering you? Well, it's been bothering me for a couple of years, but it just wasn't that bad. And then it got worse, and then it got worse, and then finally I got to the point and I went to the doctor. But again, if you know that you have a product that has potential problems and you're having any symptoms, get those checked out sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are like, I'm not going to go unless I'm in excruciating pain. And, but again, even aside from a lawsuit, forget about that. By the time you get to excruciating pain, you may have some horrible infection. And these infections can go septic and people have died. So you don't want to wait. You don't want to mess around with this kind of stuff.
And like you mentioned that there are 2 cases that are upcoming, 2 bellwethers, and these are going to be a pretty big deal, right? Because, these are going to help decide kind of the next steps for both sides. And this has been something that's been going on for years and years. So a lot of people have been prepping for this.
Oh, yeah. And again, the bellwethers, what they do is it gives both sides an idea of what a jury will do with these types of cases, how they see the liability, how pissed off they are if there's punitive damages awarded. That's a huge thing. And then how they're valuing them. What kind of range of verdict are we looking at?
It's like a case study just for actual cases.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, and the test case. I mean, that's what it is. And so, and the whole selection process is designed to make sure that they are choosing representative cases, and there are usually different categories, and that they're choosing cases that represent the different categories so that both sides get a good idea. This type of case is going to get a verdict in this range, this type of case in this other range. And then that's the information that gets used when they're crafting this global settlement.
Yeah, and so that's something I didn't really realize is when I imagine bellwethers, you're just putting, I thought it would be something where you're putting the worst of the worst out there, right? You want the highest settlement so you get the highest settlement for everyone. But it makes more sense that there's kind of different levels to it, because that's how it actually is. There's going to be different levels, and everyone's going to kind of fit in those different levels. And so to have a variety of different cases, you get a better idea across the board. Yeah.
Well, and actually, to get a little bit more into that, the process. And again, it varies from case to case, and the judge decides how they're going to do this. But a lot of the times, both sides know what the cases are, and the judge will say, okay, defense, you propose 4 cases, plaintiffs, you propose 4 cases, and I'll just randomly pick 4 cases. So the defense looks through and they look at the cases that they think are the crappiest cases, that they're most likely that they're going to get a defense verdict. And there are always those cases. There are the cases where they have a million other problems and there's other things that could have caused this, or they were doing something ridiculous. I mean,
it's a very gray area.
Or just some of them are really shitty cases. I mean, like I think I told you about the one case that was involving joint infections, and we look at the medical records, and this woman had been shooting heroin into her thigh, and now she has an infection in her knee. So again, and here's the other there's so many aspects of this. But some law firms will just file anything and everything, and they don't even look at it just to get their numbers up. And there are different reasons they want a lot of numbers too. They might want to try to get into the leadership, that sort of thing. But so there are bad cases that get filed, and in all of these, in these group discussions, it's always like, don't file bad cases. Don't file bad cases. It hurts everybody, and it doesn't help your client. Your client's going to be disappointed too if they have a bad case. Tell them the bad case. Don't file it.
And people still do it.
And they still do it. And so the defense is going to pick those, and potentially if that goes as a bellwether, there may be a defense verdict.
Yeah.
The plaintiffs are going to pick, again, those really huge, the death cases, the horrible, awful, lifelong injury cases. But the judges are pretty clear. You don't want only the great cases, because not all of the cases in the inventory are great.
Yeah.
So you do want the variety.
And that's interesting. It kind of comes down to the judge just randomly choosing it, because I'm sure if you look at the cases, you're going to be able to tell pretty clearly which side brought it to the table. I wonder if it's something like picking a name out of a hat type random.
Well, actually, what they'll do is they'll say, you defense, you give us 4 cases that you want.
Yeah.
Plaintiff, you give us 4 cases, and then they'll select another 4 kind of randomly.
No, so the judge will select another 4. Wow.
Yeah. And then they'll usually go like plaintiff pick, defense pick. They'll switch back and forth.
It's like a draft.
It's a really complicated situation.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that in this situation, in this hypothetical, there's 12 cases, but it's representing thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of plaintiffs and victims. And that is just so crazy to me that 12 cases, randomly being chosen out of a hat, some very specifically, some, not so specifically, are having such a massive effect on kind of everything.
They are, but it's not. So that might be, say, the first round, but there may be other rounds if they don't settle the cases. Like back in the ASR HIP days, they just tried case after case after case after case, and then there are other times where the cases are getting worked up and they don't even get to trial, and the defense is like, okay, let's get this.
all right, we get it. We'll give you what you want.
I know, that's the really good ones, but I can tell you that is not happening here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the big one, the Bard, that's the one where we have the 2 more bellwethers coming up. It is also the most common product. More people have the Bard than anything else, and then a lot of people don't know what product was used. They just know their doctor said, we're going to fix you up with a mesh. They do. That's information we can get for you. It's worth checking out. It's pretty straightforward.
You got a sticker.
Yeah, it's the product, the product sticker. But the surgeon would have that information. We can get that information. Definitely get it checked out.
Well, I think that's why it's so important for people to reach out to, because who knows what hernia mesh is going in you, unless you're a doctor or you're an attorney and you are aware of some of these issues. An everyday citizen is not going to ask those questions, and they shouldn't have to be fair. They really shouldn't have to. But reaching out to an attorney, which costs free, they'll look into it for you and see what's going on. And going back real quick, so with the 2 bellwether cases, on both of them, are there going to be cases that are randomly chosen out, or is each bellwether case one of the ones that were randomly chosen?
One of the ones that were chosen out. It was so, and because they pick them and then they start the case specific discovery.
Yeah.
So all of the cases that were filed, they filed the complaint, and then we have to file certain paperwork giving information, provide medical records. But there's not depositions of doctors or the plaintiff. Any of that doesn't happen until a case is getting chosen for trial, and then it gets worked up for trial. So once they pick out that group of cases, all of those, they start doing all of the pretrial work.
Yeah.
And then sometimes those cases get dismissed. They don't like it.
What happens if, there's one of the defense cases are picked and it's just one of those really shitty ones that, some random attorney put in there? Does everyone in the leadership kind of throw their hands up and they're like, oh, shit?
Actually, no, they don't throw their hands up. What they do is they call the attorney who filed it and they're like, look, this is going to mess up for everybody. You can't win this case, blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes, fairly often there are cases that are dismissed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are a variety of reasons there might too. Sometimes by the time you get there, say the client's died and the case is not, as good of a case anymore. It depends on the state you're in and what the law is. If they didn't die as a result of it, it's not a wrongful death claim. Like in Arizona, your pain and suffering dies with you. So now, well, yeah, I mean, I've had cases. Oh, yeah. So I've had cases like that where, it's a good case, but then the client dies from something else, like a cancer or something. It has nothing to do with it. And then all you can collect are the medical bills. And then you have to pay the medical bills back to the insurance company, most of them. Yeah. And so the case is just not viable to proceed with.
Well, and the phrase, the pain and suffering dies with you. I mean, it's accurate, but it's just so awful to think about when it comes to, legal and kind of return of it idea. That's crazy to me.
Well, but if you think about it, the person who had the pain and suffering now is dead. So you can't give them money to make up for the pain and suffering. So then you would be giving their family.
Which, I mean, oftentimes the family's taking care of them while they're in that pain and suffering.
And there are states where the family can collect the pain and suffering. And so it depends on what state you're in. And, so all of these things come into play. But there are times where by the time you get ready to get this case to bellwether, it's not a good case anymore. Yeah. And so it does get voluntarily dismissed, opening up that spot for, say, another case that's.
And I can't even imagine being an attorney that's, you're just trying to get names, you're trying to get numbers up on your dockets, and all of a sudden Monday morning you get a call from all of the leadership on speakerphone chewing you out. What the hell are you doing filing this case? You got to get it out of here. You're going to ruin it for all of us.
Yeah, I think there's probably been calls like that. I'm pretty confident there are.
And you mentioned this earlier of how they ask people to not file those cases. Yeah. Don't file the bad ones, but people still do it. So why is that? With the higher numbers, you have a chance getting on leadership. It sounded like that was one of the possibilities.
There is that. And then I think that there have been times where if you filed a case, everybody they think they're going to get something, even if it's a small amount, and they're willing to do it for that. Yeah, I think it's gotten pretty tough, and that, if you don't meet certain criteria, you're not going to get paid anything. Yeah. But I think some people are like, what the heck? If we don't get money, we don't get money. We file them all. We can always dismiss it if we have to start spending a lot of money litigating it. I mean, we have always been very careful about that because, you don't want to get stuck with a case that you can't win.
It's like fishing with dynamite. I mean, you're just throwing everything out there, hoping to God something comes up.
Well, I think probably fishing with dynamite is a little bit more productive.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think of a better analogy. I'm not good with analogies.
Well, so I like that one.
But you guys, you guys are more careful with it, though. You want to make sure that the cases that you do take are ones that you...
Yeah, I mean, it's not doing anybody any favors. I mean, the attorney's spending money getting in medical records. Well, although sometimes people, some of these people don't even do that till the very last minute. But, it's not good for the client. I mean, you tell them, we're going to take your case. They have certain expectations, reasonably so. Then they don't think you're wasting their time and giving them false hope. And it's not good for anybody.
Well, and that's kind of the whole setup of, personal injury attorneys not getting paid unless they win is because it's in the attorney's best interest to not waste the client's time. Right? Because I mean, you're not getting paid unless it is a good case, unless it gets and it's successful.
Yeah, you're wasting your time and your money and the client's time.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize there was these dynamics existed and almost kind of politics behind the scenes with the leadership on both sides.
Very political.
And I can't even imagine being a judge on some of these cases. I mean, your decisions, it's one thing where you have, these large cases of, 1, 2, even if you have 10 defendants or victims, whatever it is. But I mean, the decisions that they are making are affecting thousands and thousands of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a serious job.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Definitely. I mean, if you have hernia mesh, if you've had any surgeries along those lines, definitely highly recommend reaching out. If you don't know the type of hernia mesh that you have, we'll figure it out. And it's not just one brand that are having these problems. There's a lot of brands, a lot of substances and materials that are used that shouldn't be used, a lot of issues coming up, some of them taking a long time to really come up. And even if it's a small problem now, later down the line, it could be a very big problem. So I had no idea about this, but when you're having surgery, oftentimes they'll put a warming blanket on you. And one of these brands that they use is called Bair Hugger. And if you've had any type of joint replacement therapy or surgery, and it's a very invasive surgery. And oftentimes that when they are using this Bair Hugger product, it can lead to infection. And that can lead to a ton of different problems. And there's a massive case ongoing right now.
After a surgery, it's not uncommon to have an infection, but the types of infection you usually get are more surface tissue level infections. The problem with this product is that it makes it much more likely that you'll get an infection in the actual joint. And these infections can be very, very serious, even leading to death.
If you're having a surgery and they're using a specific warming blanket, there's a few different brands out there. You wouldn't know that it is Bair Hugger, and you wouldn't know that it was this specific blanket causing issues for you. But that's something that we can look into for you. All you got to do is reach out to us at Showard Law Firm, and we can look through the medical records, see what they use, and see if there is a connection. So if you've had joint replacement therapy, if you've had any issues afterwards, specifically with infections, then reach out to us, and we'll do the due diligence to make sure you're taken care of.
So maybe we go ahead and talk about the main subject, which are the Bair Hugger lawsuits that we are handling. And actually, we've been handling these things forever, it feels like, which actually I guess is 2015, which is not forever, but 8 years. That's a long time. That's a long time. Well, and these cases have gone through a real mess. But before I get into that, just kind of what it is. The Bair Hugger is a surgical warming device, and so when people are having or undergoing surgery, they keep the operating rooms like super cold.
Yeah.
And part of that is they have this what they call laminar airflow, but they have this cool air from the ceiling kind of coming down and pushing everything down to the ground. And the intent of that is to keep the surgical site clean, sterile, all of that. And you know, like when the surgeons and all of the staff come in, I mean, they're completely sanitized. But of course, they come in, they've got their shoes on.
Yeah.
You know, so the only place that's dirty is going to be the floor area. Anyway, so with certain types of surgeries, the outcome is better if the body doesn't get too cold. Mm-hmm. So, and there are different ways that you can keep somebody warm. I mean, from like to warm blankets. But this company, 3M, actually another big 3M case, has this product called the Bair Hugger, and it's a warming device. And basically, it's this blanket that has little holes in it, and it's attached to a machine that sits on the floor, and there's a tube that shoots hot air up into the blanket, and then through the little holes, this hot air goes onto the person's body. The problem with that is that the hot air then is going onto the body and overflowing down over the sides of the table, hitting the floor. Now hot air rises, so it's picking up the bacteria, the debris that's on the floor, and that can then rise back up with the hot air rising, and then it's into that surgical area. So what's happening is that when you use this, the rates of infections, surgical infections, have just skyrocketed. I mean, you can look at the studies of when they started using this, and about 90% of hospitals now use it. I mean, they have great marketing. So, and a surgical infection can be relatively minor and can be treated with antibiotics. However, certain types of surgeries like joint replacements.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you're putting a metal joint into the body, if that gets infected, it's really horrendous.
Yeah, I bet. And it's just so insane how that happens too, is that the warm air goes into the blanket, and since hot air falls, right, it goes down to the ground, gets all of that bacteria that's on the ground, and then slowly rises back up and just just gets in there. It gets into
Yeah. And I mean, so what it does is it disrupts that cold air that's trying to keep everything down. When it's the hot air, it's bringing it back up. And so the problem then is that, you know, people are getting these really bad infections, and it's so hard to get rid of an infection when it's settled into an artificial joint. And so a lot of times people will have to have like IV antibiotics. They'll have to have wound vacs. They oftentimes will have to actually take the prosthesis out and leave like a spacer in there for a while, so like they don't have a joint for a while until it clears up, then replace it. People have had amputations. a number of deaths because, again, they get this horrible infection they can't control. They go septic and they die.
I didn't even know you could do that, a spacer in the joint, so someone just doesn't even have a joint for a week,
Well,
a
they
few
have
weeks.
to take it out, but they can't put a new one in until the infection's cleared because you
Yeah.
put another one in, well, you're going to have the same situation. Yeah, I mean, I've had lots of clients who have been through this and just, it's, it's horrendous. I mean, you're pretty much bedridden.
Oh,
Or lazy
100%.
boy ridden or an Ashley recliner ridden.
God forbid it catches on fire. You don't even have a joint to
you can't
get
even
out.
move. See? Crazy shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, so these cases were consolidated back in 2015, and there were about 5,000 of them at the time. And then a lot of, some of these cases go really smoothly, and some of them do not go so smoothly. This would be the latter. And so these were in litigation, thousands of cases filed, discovery going on. And then in 2019, the judge basically dismissed all of the lawsuits. What she did is she kicked out all of the experts and said, she disqualified all of the experts. And so without any experts, she then dismissed all of the cases.
Why did she get rid of all the experts?
Well, there was everybody filed their motions, and there's always a question as to whether the science is there, whether it's a valid connection between the product and the problems, and whether you can establish that. And she basically didn't buy these experts, said they were not qualified, therefore there were no experts, bam, the cases are gone.
Jeez. I mean, to be fair, it is like an insane thing to think about, right? It's like the hot air going down, bringing it back up, and how you even figure that out. It's like you see the infection, but to assume that has anything to do with the heating blanket on them, and especially that type of interaction is happening, it is pretty insane to think about. But to just dismiss all these experts.
And on her own, because I mean, basically what most judges do is they say, well, we're going to let the jury see.
Yeah.
Because, and again, both sides had experts, and there were some really fascinating like videos where they used like this green smoke, and so that it was like this colored green smoke that you could see going in the blanket, and you could see exactly where it was going and how it was coming back up, and you could see it where the surgeon's hands were and that sort of thing. So those kinds of things. And then on top of that, this was a crazy thing too, because the inventor of the product he ended up selling it to another company, and then ultimately 3M bought it. But he ended up coming out and saying, I invented this, but you shouldn't use this for certain things, and you should not use it for artificial joints. Yeah. And so you've got now the inventor as an expert on our side. But then, of course, they're saying, well, he's biased, and he has a new product called the hot dog, and he wants to sell that instead of the Bair Hugger.
Is it also like a warming blanket?
Well, it wasn't blowing,
I love that name, the hot dog.
I know, I liked it.
It sounds comfortable, like you're just sitting between two buns. Nice and warm and cozy.
Exactly.
This guy's good at his
I know, the Bair Hugger is all cute, and it's like a bear hugging somebody. So anyway, so she dismissed them, but then it got appealed, and in 2022, the Court of Appeals reversed and said, whoa, she cannot do that. And they were pretty nasty to her. I mean, it was bad.
Yeah, so, it is pretty insane that she did that solo.
Everybody was outraged. It was like freaking out. Like, how in the hell?
It just smells a little corruption-y.
Well, interesting you should say that. So then they all got reinstated back in 2022. Litigation's back. People are filing cases again. And of course, 3M petitioned the Supreme Court to see if they would hear it. The Supreme Court denied certiorari, which says we're not going to touch it. You're stuck with what the Eighth Circuit did. So now we're back, and that was in May of 2023. So this is all kind of recent stuff. But now recently what's happened is our side, the plaintiff side, has actually filed a motion to disqualify both the judge, so her name's Judge Erickson, and also she had retained, I'm blanking on the term now, but basically the settlement judge who was involved, the magistrate judge. And so it turns out that the magistrate judge had purchased some interest in 3M, so potentially had some bias there. And then with the trial judge, they are saying that she secretly retained a retired defense attorney to advise her when she was deciding about the cases. And so they're now saying, so basically the cases are back to her to go to trial, but nobody wants to take them back to trial with her because look what she did last time.
How does they even go back to her? Like, how's that okay?
Well, that's how it always happens when it's appealed. They say, okay, judge, you screwed up. Go fix it. Go do it again. But don't, let in this case, the experts get to go, start back where you were back in 2019.
But you are I feel like the judge already has in order to dismiss it the first time, she already has this perspective,
strong feelings,
some strong feelings. Like, how does it ever make sense to send it back to that original person that already feels a certain way?
Well, I mean, the judges are supposed to be unbiased, and they may have to set aside any personal feelings that they have. I'm just saying that's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. But the reason these motions are being filed is that people don't feel like this judge can or will do that.
Yeah.
And basically, why the heck go to trial again when we know that she's against it?
Yeah.
And the judge makes so many decisions through the whole process. I mean, every single objection, every single, there's so many ways that the judge's rulings affect the case. So that's where it is right now, is that there has been this motion to disqualify. Now, it's a little more complicated even than that because she's getting ready to retire anyway. So it kind of makes sense that, a huge MDL like this is not what she wants to be doing right now anyway. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Well, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. But these cases are very active. A lot more cases are getting filed because this thing's still being used.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned 90% of hospitals, but I do want to touch on, because you said that the court of appeals were saying some nasty stuff about her.
Yeah.
What were they saying? I'm curious.
Well, they just basically, I didn't call her names or something
you big
like
dumb idiot. What the hell are you doing over here?
It was close to that. I mean, it was very strong language about how outrageous it was.
Oh,
God.
I
mean, you don't usually see it that strong. It was some juicy stuff, for sure.
No. And I'm sure the prosecution side of it is thank God they see this,
Right. Well, I mean, everybody was just so outraged. But anyway, so these cases are very active. And basically, it's the cases are anybody who has had a joint replacement surgery. A lot of times it's the hips and knees, and this product was probably used. You would not necessarily know it, but the anesthesiologist is the one who applies this. And so it would be in the anesthesia records. Those are records we can obtain. But if somebody has had a joint replacement surgery, had a bad infection following it, potentially they would have a case. At this point, these things are going to go forward because the Supreme Court doesn't want it.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty interesting. People are pretty excited about these again, and there are a lot of them. But it's happening now. So.
And so you guys are, I'm assuming we're just looking for individuals that have had any type of joint replacement, and then it's of interest to look and see if Bair Hugger was used, or is it only joint replacements that they had some type of infection after?
Well, you have to have some damages. Okay. So, you have to have suffered from an infection. And again, if it's just a really minor soft tissue infection that gets treated with, 10 days of antibiotics, that's not worth pursuing a case.
Yeah.
But if it was a significant infection, if you needed to go on IV antibiotics, if you had to have a revision surgery, any of the serious problems, then it's definitely worth finding out if that product was used. A good chance that caused or contributed to the problem.
And I'm curious, how the conversation happened with the patient and doctor afterwards, because you have this joint replacement. And in some of these cases, it is absolutely terrible where you're having the joint actually taken out again. How is that? Doc, what's going on? Why is this infection so terrible? Is this common? Does this happen a lot?
Well, so that's a really good question. And the reality is that surgical infections do happen, and that is a risk of any surgery. And so when you're, signing, when the doctor's talking to you about the risks, they always will say it's a potential that you're going to have an infection.
Yeah.
But again, how serious is the infection? And the likelihood of a serious infection is certainly much higher if this product was used. And some doctors now don't use it any longer. They will not do the surgeries with it because they understand this. They agree with it. There are plenty of surgeons, anesthesiologists who say, this is a bunch of bullshit, we're going to use it. I know that, over the many years now that I've been involved in these cases, a number of friends have had surgeries, and they have always told the doctor going in, I do not want that used, because they know about that. Yeah. And so the doctors have not used it. And I mean, you can use warm blankets. You can, there are other things that you can do. And again, we could get into the weeds a lot, but obviously I don't think we want to do that. But there's also a question about how long the surgery really requires warming. And a lot of these surgeries are pretty quick and don't. So, it's not necessarily the case that somebody has to be, they certainly don't have to be warmed with this product. There are other ways.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask, if there are other products, and it sounds like there is. But you also mentioned earlier that it's still being used in a lot of hospitals. Yeah,
it's being used a lot. And so, new cases are coming up all the time because it's still being used and people are getting these horrible infections. And, for a long time, we couldn't take these, we weren't taking these cases because it looked like it might have been completely over. But they have been revived. Not going to go anywhere at this point. Looks like these will be going to trial coming up.
Hopefully with a new judge.
Well, hopefully with a new judge, absolutely. And like I said, I don't think she wants to do it. Well, we don't want her to do it. So hopefully we just move on and everybody's happy.
You mentioned that she hired, behind closed doors, a personal defense attorney to advise her. What is it?
This is the allegation.
This is the allegation. Yeah, yes. But what does that mean? What was advising her that she should drop it? It was a defense attorney from the defense side of the case?
Well, not from the particular case, but somebody who had, was more aligned with that side, who was looking at these expert witnesses and kind of advising her on kind of the basis maybe for excluding them, or at least giving her his opinion. And that's not something that a judge should be doing.
I was going to ask, is that common for judges?
I hope not. No, they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, that's insane. And I'm glad that the Court of Appeals chewed her out on that. I mean,
everybody was pretty glad about that.
I almost want to see the transcript of what they said.
I will pull that because it just the little parts of it. But yeah, there was during one of the AAJ meetings, we kind of read through some of it, and there were some kind of highlights. So I'll pull that. I mean, it's public record, and I have it.
And I mean, especially in that judge's position where you have hundreds of attorneys, thousands and thousands of victims of the case seeing this and hearing about it. That has to be terrible to be ridiculed in front of that many people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the people don't really get it. And, and again, it's not like calling names, but I mean, it's from an attorney's perspective, it's like, ooh, that's smart. Ow.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah.
Damn.
So.
Well, it's good that it's back. And
it's back and it's alive and moving forward. So.
And anyone that's had any type of infection after surgery, it's worth reaching out.
Absolutely. And like I said, you wouldn't necessarily know if it was used, but it's pretty quick and easy to be able to get the documentation to determine that. We do that regularly. We will order those records and let you know, if you do have a qualified case.
And generally, the severe cases happen with joint replacement, but it's possible for it to happen with other types
Yeah. But I mean, it's really a bad idea to use it with when you put a foreign body in, that's where the infection just kind of seizes and settles in there, and you can't get it out without taking that out of the body. And then, like we said, I mean, you're gonna have to be jointless for a while. So
I mean, joint replacement surgery in general has always been such a terrifying idea in my head. I mean,
it's pretty miraculous, though. I mean, the results are so good. And I mean, I know a number of people who have had it. And I mean, it's just like, people are having such a hard time walking. And then, they get their lives back. I mean, they can play sports, they can, do all kinds of things. So it's super, when it's successful, it's just life-changing and a great surgery. But, again, things can go wrong, and you want to do everything to avoid it, and avoiding using this product is going to give you better odds of a good outcome.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode and you learned everything that you could. If you do have any additional questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us. You can always give us a call. We got Danny on the phones. She's an absolute joy to talk to. And if you're a little nervous, you don't want to talk to anyone, that's okay. We feel you. You can always send us an email. You can message us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is. We'll get back to you. We'll answer your questions and we can get things started. And I know sometimes this can feel a little overwhelming, but that's why we're here. We'll take care of it for you. We'll reach out to the doctors. We'll get the medical records and we'll get everything that we need for you.
Yes, and we'll be back next week with another live episode, including updates from my trip to Vegas for Mass Torts Made Perfect. We'll see you then.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.